not. What are the designs behind all that? And now my next speaker is Mr. Dirk Terwel. Mr. Dirk Terwel is a senior associate of the Institute for Environmental Studies in The Hague. He has a background in war study and has worked and lived for several years in Afghanistan. In recent years, he has focused in direction of the SME development in fragile states like Palestine or Moldova and follows development in Afghanistan and the region. Mr. Terwel. Yeah, please.
I'm honored to share some thoughts about my experiences and about my ideas on what's also happening in the region. I received an email from UNEPO via Woutervening yesterday morning. So, and my wife just gave birth to a baby. I've just gone on father since a few days and heard yesterday morning, hey, are you available for sharing your thoughts on what we see in the region and what's going on over there? So it's been wrapping up, getting a bit challenging, but let's see what the picture is telling us and what our thoughts are. So excuse me if there are some thoughts in it that you consider as incorrect, but it's been a little bit of a roller coaster over the last few days. So, as I've been introduced, I've got a background in war studies. I worked in and lived in Afghanistan for several years, and the question could be why I'm here. I will focus in this presentation on the Wakhan corridor as being a panhandle buffer between Tajikistan, Pakistan, and China, and the bordering areas. There are two cultural. Yes, thank you. Culturally, there are two people living there, the Wakhi, that are living in the north of, it's hard to say, in the north of Pakistan, so near the name Nashek, the highest mountain of Afghanistan, and more east in the Wakhan, the Kyrgyz, that are originally from Kyrgyzstan. So in the western part of the Wakhan are the Wakhi people that can also be found in northern Pakistan. The case I'll try to describe is a bit more specific. So I think it fits really into the other presentations since it's less geopolitical and it's less focusing on the role of China in this regard. So, looking at where it is, the Wakhan corridor can be found between some world powers, and the Wakhan as an area where law enforcement and these kind of words are virtually non-existent, is an area where about 30,000–40,000 people are living. They try to find their way in ordinary life and have the source of income mainly on agriculture and raising their cattle, more goats, shepherds, and yaks. So sometimes they say if people are into where are the first yaks can be found on the map, some people would say, okay, if you travel from Iran into the direction of Afghanistan, moving to Pakistan, the Kyrgyz people, that are the first locals, Pakistan, Kyrgyz, that are using yaks as a mode of transport. So, yeah, please. Just as shared in the booklet also of the chairman and other people, Great Game is a great book, by the way, for Peter Hopkirk. Having a hand on the heartland of Asia, China, Pakistan, we all know about it, and the British and Russian empires, and on the trade routes. A lot has been told about this, so most of you are completely updated on the subject. I just want to introduce it briefly. How the Wakhan as a kind of part of Afghanistan has been created as a buffer zone. So why, the reason for telling this is, a buffer zone could mean, okay, so it's from a socio-economical point of view not interesting, because that's where we'll focus on. It's an area that is left alone, but because it's such a small place, what does it say for us, looking at the case of northern Pakistan? Because this is the area we're talking about here. Please. Okay. So the current context, I will answer the question I've raised in a few moments. So the current geopolitical context, the economical power, the tribal context of northern Pakistan, the insecure border areas, the geographical landscape, and the fragile environmental situation. So the Wakhan, especially the last two ones, the environmental situation and the tribal context and insecure border areas as being, that's the way at least some local force, local powers, world powers look at it. One of the biggest challenges from an environmental security point of view, that's why the Wakhan is interesting as a small stretch of land. And it could be also gives a look into what happens in other places in the north of Pakistan, I would say. The highlands of Pakistan, the highlands of Tibet, of Tajikistan, of Afghanistan. There is, of course, a geopolitical struggle. There is the rising power of China. But in the meantime, there's also the case, how do the local people, the Wakhi in this case, the Kyrgyz in this case, but also local people, the local settlers, farmers in Pakistan themselves, how do they get around? It's a very day-to-day question. How do they get around? Where are they living from? And it's key of discussing the geopolitical context and the role of Pakistan as a government and China and the game they play. But on the other hand, underneath is also how do these people live? Since if there's not a source of income, if the income is in agriculture, if the income is in their flock that they expand, there's a big risk of erosion, there's a big risk of migration, there's a big risk of leaving people out. So what options do we leave them? As already shared, there's building dams, construction of roads. The local people have seen nothing from it, not a penny. In the meantime, apart from bigger projects, how can we protect the environment for them in the long run? And how can we protect that's what they have? And is there any way of making things sustainable? So small stretch of land on the altitude of 3,700. Reason I'll show you some pictures, because with pictures saying a lot of the reality. Just one back, of the reality. Where are we talking about? How do these people live? And if the people live like this, is there any reason for them to stay over here? It sounds a bit rude, but apart from mining, what is the local force that is available, that is standing up and say, hey? Because in the end, it's key to discuss stuff here in Brussels, but if for the people there's no source of income and no reason or opportunity to stay, the discussion will only be taking place here. And the relatives over there, just suffering day-to-day life, and just seeing that they cannot be farmers anymore, that they cannot have any source of income. And it's good to discuss what the governments are doing, but if they have to migrate because there's just nothing left, where it's about them. So, inhabited, as I said, by people from a Wakhi, decent and Kyrgyz background, big small farms and big flock, maybe sheep, goats. I will show you some pictures, just that is giving an insight in the Wakhan as a corridor, but I certainly believe, based on my travels in northern Pakistan, China and Tajikistan, that there are similarities in the landscape. There are similarities in how people live, and how they try to get around and live day-to-day life. So the first picture, for example, the first part of the Wakhan, you see the high peaks. This is Mount Noshek, by the way, the highest peak of Afghanistan, 7,500. So you see more or less the green areas in the valley, as we all know, and small plots of land. The Wahi themselves, they are farmers. As you look at the migration figures, I didn't bring them into the presentation, but migration figures show that of the 30,000 people from Wahi Eastland that live, that about 80-85% considers migration as a realistic option, because is there a next month? The plot of land is just too small. If you look at risk ideas of increasing the plot of land, just for basic agriculture, where? Tell me. So these people we hear from, this is the first part where Wahi people live, that are similar to, I can imagine, to where Wahi people live in Pakistan. Yes, there is a discussion of big dams, roads, China, Pakistan, but this is also the reality, the day-to-day reality. If you go to the next, yes, a small settlement where people are trying to get around. What you often see is in season, they move in during the season, they move to other places. The Wahis, what I've heard, didn't check it. They're looking for work. They're moving in 16, 18, looking for work in the trade route. The trade itself officially is not allowed because the border is closed, but they still do it. They try to find jobs in, as you know, in Gilgit, in Kabul, in Dushanbe, capital of Tajikistan, and who's left behind? More the older people. So if the older people are the force that in somewhere needs to stand up for the issues we are discussing, and we are discussing it here, how can we create a prospect for people that say, hey, we're willing to stay here because there are enough economical opportunities and there is any source of income to stay. If you look at the next one, so the great game story from Peter Hopkirk is about the Brits and the Russians trying to find their way, the Secret Service, playing the great game. And one of the famous pictures, of course, by Horst, that they try to find their way and playing this spy game. And now you see this. What I've seen in Tibet, northern China, some parts of north Pakistan, this is Afghanistan, Tajikistan, landscape is a little bit similar, although this is a region that is between 4,000 and 5,500 meters high. Little rain, and the flock of the Kyrgyz here is increasing. Why? Because in the flock of the Kyrgyz, that's their asset. What else is there? That's their asset. Difficult one is the only trade that's taking place is people that trade poppy for sheep, goats, and yaks. And as a consequence, sadly enough, very sadly enough, a large part of the Kyrgyz, no, let's try to be nice and neat. A part of the Kyrgyz population in the Wakhan is often under the influence of poppy. Because the people from other sources are coming saying, hey, this is what I offer for you, for your yak, for your, and what other way of trade, realistic trade do you have? So they think, okay, we get something in return. The flock was increased from the yak flock over the last 5 years, more than 500%. Goats, sheep, more than 500%. And with little rain and grazing, you can imagine what this will be in 10, 20 years. More or less moving into the desert. So that's another reason for local people to move out. And at this stage in this area, it's not certain what the minerals are specifically. There's no rule of law. Yes, of course, other institutes will know what might be under the ground, whether that is attractive or not. But in the meantime, for the population now here, what is left? The next few ones, this is Borogil, so the end of the road in the Wakhan. We are now looking at the direction of, you're seeing Pakistan by the way. I just discussed with this minister that this about Borogil. That's a famous small trade route between for the Wahi people from Pakistan and Afghanistan. Although they don't see themselves as parties of all Afghans, of course, as Wahis. So beautiful, but from these small plots of land they can't live. They can't live. Not in Afghanistan, and I can imagine hard to live in Pakistan. So I think I've got one more picture about it. Yeah, so here you see an interesting picture. A small farmer getting a little bit bigger because he's increasing his flock, and in that way having a source of income. But to be honest, the local environmental situation is so fragile that if we would be honest, who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? Don't get me wrong. But if we're looking from an environmental security point of view, it's such a big flock is it's too big for the environmental fragile state of the region, of the corridor. And this is only one flock or one farmer. Think about it. We are talking here about 30,000 Wahis and 10,000 Kyrgyz. Farmers, families, 8 people, 10 people living. So, but it gives a snapshot of the reality on the ground. So here again, on the way to Pakistan this was. So yeah, green pasture, highlands, deep valleys. The peaks are around 6,000, and if you look at the population, the people between 20 and 40 years old are virtually not existing. They left. So who's standing up for all these cases, really, in the valleys, deep in the valleys we are talking here about? So, I don't have an answer. It's just a thought that I'm like, hey, based on my local experience. Please. So the current situation, you could say, environmental degradation is evident. Increasing flock size, smaller plots, Wahi, living in the beginning of the Wakhan, even migration or using the plot of land more intensively. So what would be worth discussing is your ideas, or how can we bring this into the case we're talking here about. How can we bring these ideas on having sustainable ways of income for the local population, giving them an opportunity to stay even, to stay as a beginning of a positive way of force that's saying, hey, it's our land, it's worth living, and in order to be able to live here in the coming generations, we as local population need to have a sustainable perspective from an agricultural side and maybe from a different side on how we would like to live here. So I think that is on the future. Yeah, thank you. Are there any sources of income away? Not away. In addition to what we've said on taxes on roads, mining, etc., local sources of income. If there's a risk that the things we are standing up for, the legal structure, the law enforcement, if that's maybe only on a long-term perspective getting started, what on a shorter-term perspective is possible in sources of income to avoid more environmental degradation? The trade opportunity leaving out, I say, yeah, there is some trade between Wahi, but virtually it's not a level of trade that where a lot of locals can live from. Talking about water, as in the Wakhan corridor, Wakhan for irrigation is used little, and from a geopolitical point of view, for the African government, it's not playing a role. In the meantime, China, it's interesting, this small corridor, 300 kilometers. In the end, there is the border with China, and there's a big fence. It's just in the middle of nowhere, and you can walk around it. And the fence saying, yeah, this is where China is starting, so you're not allowed to continue. And there's just nobody. But if you go around the fence 100 meters, there's a road starting, a road, think about it, in the middle of nowhere. So why are the Chinese building a road in the middle of nowhere, ending in the Wakhan? So that's in line with what we have discussed before. China is finding his ways, is seeking for his ways to have influence and be ready. The Wakhan could be a unique tourist destination if you talk about source of income, but up to this stage it's been used little, this potential, although there is some access via Tajikistan. Also, source of income if you talk about the Wakhi, the north of Pakistan. Officially, you're not allowed to cross the border. There's a famous professor from America, John Little, but his PhD was on the Wakhi culture in northern Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and he tried to get a visa to travel between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Officially, it took him 3 years. So, let's say it's making tourists as a tourist destination beautifully. This part accessible is making it very difficult. So this is So this is a short look at a specific region, the Wakhan, where I've been working. I've worked in Badakhshan, the north of Afghanistan, and I was based in Badakhshan and Kabul, and I've traveled in the north of Pakistan. But could be worth thinking about it, to discuss with each other. From hey, we've got the big challenges, but in the meantime, there's another challenge, I would say, and that's environmental degradation and the future of people and their ordinary daily lives. So these were my thoughts, and I'm open for any questions. Or I can imagine, Laura, that's for a later stage.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll speak to you later, I hope.